Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. And open, my throat and my chest area just felt a lot more open, and I wasn't afraid.
Right.
And trauma is fear, like personified, you know what I mean? And then the third time it was another time, but it didn't feel, I didn't have the need as much as I did the first and second times. Yep. There was just something different that happened. And I mean, I watch, like, I think it's time for me to do another one, like of getting that place where it's like, yep, I got some things that are going on that are happening, and I don't even hesitate. I'm just like, what's John's schedule looking like today? But my clients too, like they're coming up and they're going, because I'll say to them, just try it. Right. Because even now I'm having a hard time explaining it.
Right, it's
just
tricky.
Try it, because your experience of it is going to be different than my experience of it.
Right.
And this time might be different than the next time that you do it. And one of the things I noticed is that you adjusted each time. You didn't do the same thing each time.
Right. Right.
So there was something must have been picking up on. You're like, well, this is what I need to do this time as opposed to that time. So that's a long story, but I wanted to share that with you.
That's a great firsthand account of what it is. And one, it's a little bit. It's kind of like a bunch of people getting together to talk about how their cell phones work. It's like we all have them, but we don't really we just expect it to, when I hit the Safari thing, it's going to take me to whatever, We don't really know how it works, but we're all carrying them around.
Right.
And same thing with our relationship with sound. Everyone likes music. It's something our body is really congruent to. Okay?
Our brain actually processes music in a different part of our brain than any other,
like the auditory cortex.
But it has its own special space. There's a reason for that.
So there's just a lot of just touching on a couple of those things that the different treatments that I worked on with you. There are other modalities out there that have made some nice discoveries about this. We're talking about the magnetic field of the body. So just like Einstein says, anything with an electric field has a magnetic field. So we're just using that same principle. Okay. So the magnetic field is the area outside of your body. Okay. Some people call it the body field. I mean, the biofield. I call it the ambient field. Okay, like the space you can hear around the person.
Is that what people would call an aura, or is that different?
Ambient field is more like something you'd use in the sound engineering booth or something, but it's still what I can hear, and the direction that I'm hearing it at too. So you kind of touched into some of your inner oral hearing. Those experiences were going on, you could hear things in different directions. Maybe it was a little confusing, and that's why it's a good diagnostic tool, because I can actually say, I was working on one with concussion, and she's telling me, I can't hear that on this side. And I'm like, well, she's got a certain kind of concussion where her ear has been affected, because
she was unable to hear it over here.
Yeah, and that helped me treat her in a whole different way, just knowing that if I didn't bring sound into it, and she said, well, I got a concussion because I fell on my face, and that would have never come up. Do you know what I mean? But I could quickly diagnose the type of concussion it was, why she was having trouble, especially with certain things that had to do with balance, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you're already going to have difficulty with those already. But the point is, it's a great diagnostic tool, what you're listening to, and it's just important to listen. So it's hard to teach people to listen.
Yeah.
That's just a known fact, but that's where I'm going with this. I'm training people how to do this. You know what I mean? And
how to do sound therapy?
Yeah. How to do it safely, and just to make it more commonplace. Even in our local community. So I just did one last month, and it was a simple one. It's like an introduction, and it's just great to see people, getting into it. But you can also see, there's a danger to it. You really want good instruction, and you need. It's technical. It's more technical than you think. So when you say, I don't understand how it works, well, it's because there's a lot of technical stuff that goes with like, how do you hold the tuning forks? How do you, how do you work with the energy that you're actually hearing? How far away do you go? I could walk 20 feet away from you and do a session, It's kind of like being the guy with the stick looking for water, you know what I mean? It's very ancient, it works. You're going to be pulled one way or the other. But the more you ask why, you should be really filling in those blanks with just do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's because what happened? You have got all these positive, quick results from it. So it's a little bit like hypnotism. Okay, it's not being hypnotized, but there's like you're kind of entraining your own body with the sound, and therefore you're feeling better. You're feeling better about talking about things that maybe aren't super comfortable. It's just like playing a nice song. It's going to like stir up certain emotions. That profile timeline is something that I haven't discovered. It's not my discovery. It's another modality of where the 5 feet off the body, there's a timeline of where you put your distortions and traumas, and it doesn't put like happy birthday in there. It puts like, oh, this is when I was in a car accident. This is when I got divorced. This is when this is when my grandmother died. That's what's put in there because, there's this whole hurt part of our like psyche where we don't put the hurt, and this is my theory, okay, this is not, this is just from working with sound therapy, is we can't hold in all the hurt. We've got to put it somewhere. You know what I mean? So we kind of put it in off to the left or off to the right. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we're going to take it out of the body. If you thought of, if you were in a car accident, or if you even witnessed a car accident that was like fatal, it would not make you want to get back into a car again for a long time. But there's a part of us that can be like, okay, I can, try to remember to forget type thing. You know what I mean? You're forgetting, we're programmed to forget. But what I find with the sound therapy, and this is how I'm kind of walking into the trauma and the grief part, is that part that you've forgotten is out there. Okay. And it's an easy way to encourage it. You're not trying to re-traumatize a person. Once again, I personally don't want the person I'm working on to be re-traumatized as we're working.
Oh, yeah.
And go back to a 5-year-old memory as an adult. Maybe that's not the point of the session, but it is my point to kind of give it like a little bump, send it back into like the chakra system, into like the rivers of our body, the waterways. Okay. Because remember, we're water, what conducts electricity pretty well?
Yeah.
Water. So we're kind of like regurgitating things, like pushing them back into the system to be remembered, processed maybe one more time. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where like you maybe lost somebody, or you maybe have like a trauma that you've already talked and solved and
you'll go over it over and over again.
Over and over again.
No, and then you'll have a new trauma and it takes you right back.
Yeah.
And that's normal. I just want to make sure everybody understands.
Yeah.
It's normal to go back when you have a new trauma, to go, oh yeah, exactly. There's a familiarity there, and also it's bringing up all those old emotions now.
So that's where the safety part is. I don't try to do any kind of suggestibility. I might ask somebody what's going on here. This is like the time, and just leave it at that, because the sound's still going to do the work. The body remembers, like you said, the body keeps score, like that book, and all you're doing is kind of just like introducing it again softly. Okay, you're not dwelling on it, and but you're touching on it, and a lot of times in the healing process, we forget what messed us up in the first place. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
No, I mean, especially if it's chronic.
Right.
Like you could have grown up as a survivor of sexual abuse, and like where the freak is the beginning, and so what?
Does that help with the trauma piece a little bit?
It
like
does,
where it's like it's like a diagnostic tool a little bit?
I understand where you're going with that. My question is then, how does that help somebody heal grief and trauma? Like you go in, you use your tuning forks, you're tuning into their bodies, you're recognizing where things are, and their field. Oh God, you just said the field, and my brain is.
Do you not like the word the field?
No, I like the field. I'm aware that I've. This is my 7th podcast today. So my brain, ambient field.
Right,
so you're in the ambient field. I'm very proud of myself. I just came up with that damn word again.
Good.
So the ambient field.
It's under A.
So you're in there. You're in this ambient field, and you're trying to like, how does that help a person who is grieving or is navigating trauma heal? Like you said, it kind of bumps it back in, but
Right.
how exactly does that help somebody heal?
I feel like there's like a proverbial bubble that needs to be popped with grief and trauma. So it's
Okay.
like, and to me, that's kind of just like popping that bubble. So then you can just see clearer. And that bubble is a little bit like being in the dark, and I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. But to me, even just like, it's just freeing. It's liberating the person.
Okay, so you're looking for like a feeling of like it
Just
almost
like
creates
you
a
said,
lightness.
how did you describe you went downstairs, we had a session, you came back up, I felt introspective, I felt
Grounded,
grounded, I felt,
centered,
well, what better
rooted.
place to take care of your trauma and grief from that place?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because then you have you have a whole nother set of coping, and you're within. We were talking about an affective window. I've done it before in other podcasts, but also in these, talking about what the affective window is being able to think and feel your feelings without being so overwhelmed. And when you're traumatized, or you're going through something that's very activating, you're like hyper aroused, like way, way up there, which is where I was when you and I started working together. I was going through a lot of stuff. And then there's the hypo arousal where you're depressed and you have no energy and you're like that. So I felt like after the sound therapy session that I got back into my affective window, because when you're in your affective window, you are able to do a lot of work there. That allows you to respond to things that are happening instead of automatically reacting to things. Like what happens with mindfulness too.
Yep.
When you truly get into a meditative mindfulness practice, you're able to respond. You have choice versus reactive, which is just your body just going boom and going, you know, so to speak, balls to the wall with like whatever is going on, and then your body reacts, and then all of a sudden it's downward spiral.
Right.
So for me, it felt like I got into the affective window. So if that's part of what's happening here, without a doubt, the amount of work that can happen doesn't even mean you're in your affective window and we're here in therapy and so we're talking and you can stay there and we can use that as a coping skill. You can go do the sound therapy and you're leaving in your affective window, which means you're out in the world, navigating the world in a place where you can handle it better. It's like a emotional regulation. That's what it is. It's like an emotional self-regulation that doesn't have to be taught in therapy.
Yeah, I love
It's
that.
being happened through the body. Oh yeah, that's it.
Well, that's why I love talking to you, because that's like, that's chapter 10.
Yeah.
The affective
Yeah.
window, because that's basically that's how I see it, as this clarity that, and I guess I was describing it as like auto tuning too. It's like it's something it continues for enough so you can take it out into the world with you. It's not just like just leaving like a good meeting or a good session. It's you and you're on your own with it.
Yep.
And that affected window, I love that. And I think that's a big part of it. One of my teachers is like a psychologist, and he would just do this just a little bit at the end of the session, like, and he has a whole different method than other methods that are out there. And then of course anyone that's curious with sound, it's like playing the guitar. Just because there's a book about playing the guitar doesn't mean you need to play the guitar that way.
Right.
It's like, it's just sound. It's not, you don't have to have all these rules, but you do want to stay curious and see what works and what doesn't. So when you said, well, every session was a little different, you know what I mean? It's just like, well, that's where I've come in with this as coming from Berkeley and just being a musician. And then also I got an earth science degree from Penn State. Like, I'm really into what's the resonance of the earth? How are we relating, where's the beta, theta, alpha waves in our brain? What's going on with that? What's going on with, how are we dividing the binaural beats? How are we working in function?
Right.
You know what I mean? And anatomy and sound, okay? And that's important to teach. So there's a lot of these modalities are kind of still in that new age thing, like it's all cool, like it's welcome to cool, and it misses. To me, it gets dangerous because then you're using sound in a kind of uninformed way.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't want to. I can always teach someone okay? But a lot of modalities don't really go into that because they don't want the responsibility of it, okay? Because this is heavy duty stuff. This is
If
not,
you did that wrong that day, I'd have been a mess.
yeah, I
Like, and
mean,
when I say wrong, I guess irresponsibly,
right.
you're like, hey, I know how to use a tuning fork. Well, that's great. But if you weren't really informed, yeah, I couldn't.
It's like the
Yeah.
old commercials for like these Memorex tapes. I'm kind of dating myself here,
Right.
but what they would
Oh,
have,
I'm right there with you.
they would have the guy, they would have the woman singing into the glass, like to
Yeah.
show
Yeah.
how powerful her pressure wave was coming out of her mouth, and it would break the glass. Well, you can also do that when you're trying to use sound healing. You don't want to break the person. You don't want to blow up the field.
Right.
Okay, the field is this sacred place where we keep information. It's your aura, it's your soul, it's all these things that we can't see it. I can hear it.
You can hear it.
Okay, we can.
What kind of
Anybody can
research
hear
is behind it?
it. Well, that's a great question. You know, different, like, of course, everyone kind of has like the what they want. So if it's for MS, they're looking at what does it do for the
MS, multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
Okay.
So that. So let me just paraphrase like some of the findings,
please do.
some of the research.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of, because I had a brain injury, this is the wormhole that I went down, and this is where I said, wow, I got a lot of rapid work out of this. I got rewiring. I have, I don't feel like I'm savant. That's a weird thing to say, but I was rewired quickly and efficiently through sound, okay? But that was me being a music teacher. This is like, I'm not on a light sound diet.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is me as a yoga instructor. So I went basically full tilt on all this and a full diet. That's why I'm so adamant about teaching people this, to get it's not about me. It's just about teaching people how to use these. Even if your relative has Alzheimer's, like if you just had like some tuning forks around and just did some work in a coherent fashion, like with some intelligence, you could help them. You know what I mean? Why? Because the research, the sound is kind of flushing out. So let's just say there's mind stuff in all these things, whether it's concussion, epilepsy, okay? And in the fabric of our mind, it's just like looking up into the Milky Way or something. There's all these different connections. And as these diseases kind of take hold, or like say like the NFL guys that have the repeated concussion,
Yep.
All that, it's basically just like a coagulation of things that are supposed to flow. Okay, and I'm really dumbing this down to just like not a science journal conversation, but just so the average, so I can kind of get it out and still cover whether it's, all three of these brain things, concussions, TBIs, MS, Alzheimer's, kind of have this study where the sound is flushing out what's creating the wheel to cog.
And this is research.
This is research.
This is
now,
yeah.
I look at it from the lens of a sound facilitator, sound healing facilitator. As myself, I say, well, they're using machines. They're using certain frequencies. I'm always like, what frequency are they using?
Gotcha.
Are they using ultrasound? Okay. Are they using this?
They're getting quantitative again.
So we're getting quantitative. Even like, say the Havana syndrome, where these government employees have been kind of dosed with sound and sonic weaponized sound that messes up their equilibrium, gives them headaches, So I contacted a couple of the doctors. I'm saying, okay, what? And every doctor I contacted was like, oh, I don't work with people. They're just looking at the numbers. They're looking at the quantitative.
Yeah, the quantitative.
And it's important, but. So I'm kind of saying.
But there's a scientific flatland that is happening and has happened. When you get into qualitative kinds of work, now we're getting out of this kind of flatland process, which is where we are.
Which is good. It's not
you need both.
It's not the end of the world.
No, not at all.
But the point is like I look at something like the Havana syndrome where people are weaponizing sound. Well, it's like being a sound engineer. You're going to get on the bus of what the bus is.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're wounded with sound, you can bring sound and frequency back to heal. Okay, so that's kind of like just an example of how sound can be, how powerful it is, the fact that it is weaponized, and how powerful a tool it is to take care of just simple things like wellness. And it's dangerous to say, hey, I can solve your MS. Do I have a client with MS? Yes. Is she getting better? Is she feeling better? Yes. Okay. She still has to go to Harvard and get her x-rays. She still has to, she still doesn't always get good news, but she feels better. Okay. Alzheimer's, another field. Another field that is shows research of sound being helpful is in like brain tumors.
That's amazing.
And the one little fact is the medicine that they're giving people to help cure is being absorbed a lot better because you're breaking down that brain barrier. Okay, this whatever's protecting the brain.
The blood-brain barrier.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like you can kind of weave into it.
The medication
can
can get in there better.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So why not? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But who's facilitating it? That's kind of like where I'm at with this. Like, why not train more people? Why not get this like out there a little bit more and make it more commonplace when you walk into a doctor's office to see a tuning fork? Like, if I was an orthopedic surgeon, I'd have one of these around and be like, you know what? Let me listen to this thing first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because you could tell me about it. You don't know anything about anatomy and physiology. I mean, you do, of course.
I understand what you mean, yeah.
Like you telling me the story about your knee doesn't tell me that story, that it's crying out for help.
Yeah, I'll be back after the knee surgery for you to.
I don't know. I get kind of I kind of bubble up with like excitement with all this too, because I'm just so passionate about it.
Yeah.
And it is, you're always a frontiersman when there's skeptics. You know what I mean? So, and those same people are on their cell phones. They know it's not plugged into anything. They're getting all the information. Like there's things work, and maybe they're even working better with the more electrosmog that we have out there. Maybe electrosmog is allowing more and more things to travel at a certain rate. Like who says that channel 3 hasn't skipped to channel 5 or
right.
I don't know. It's just we're living in a really complicated place where we have a lot of electrosmog that's not even like talked about. You know what I mean?
Electrosmog.
Like 5G.
Yeah.
It's a borderline X-ray. And then these kids are walking around, males and females walking around with them in their pockets. What's going to happen to the reproductive system?
Let me tell you, I stopped using my phone up to my ear like a whole lot more now. I've been putting it on like speaker.
Well, you can see.
Because we don't know. And I'm like, it's closer to my head. It's closer to my brain. That can't be good for me.
Well,
you know
they
what
do
I mean?
know. I mean, there's a woman in Australia that does a lot of great research, and you can see some of her YouTube videos. But it isn't something that is promoted by the industry, and it's not something that we see. But I'm bringing that up just as like an example of we can't see it, but it certainly transmits a lot of information. And then I look at that as just an example of like the ambient field. We can't see it, but there's a ton of information around us, and we're no different than the cell phone. Like we just have all this unlimited information that can be untapped.
You know what just I thought of? Because you and I could, honest to God, I could be here for 2 hours.
I know.
And poor,
Ding.
Yeah. But I was thinking, one thing that came to my mind was, again, the sound bowl. And as I know my therapist works with that when I walk into the therapy room and I go, hey, I need to start out with like a 10-minute mindfulness, kind of get my head in here. Boom, and I got one at home, right? And then the other thing I was thinking of is at the end of yoga, sometimes the yoga instructor will go, okay, we're going to, do the sound of the universe and go om, and then we'll all go in there, the om, but everybody has their own om, and then you hear it all come together.
Yeah.
Where it's like you can feel the vibration. Like your voice might be lower in your om than mine. It's like om, and it's just really, I don't know, anyway. So
those are harmonics.
That's the
beauties of the harmonics.
And I grew up with a musician. Like I grew up with my father, who, and I don't know, I played clarinet and played guitar a whole lot before I moved into my,
and all that's your relationship with sound. That's kind of what I kind of preach. Like if you don't have a relationship with sound, find one.
Or listen to
build
music.
It, or just learn the major scale. Okay, like if you can get disciplined with music, you can get disciplined with sound healing, and then like just to kind of pull it into the grief, because I have done such beautiful work here at the center just for me as a witness, once again, I get to watch the transformation, and you know, the grief cases come in, and there's what is the sound of grief, you know, and it's kind of, it's just, it's very like cementish.
Yeah.
It's very thick. It's heavy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not good or bad. It's heavy energy.
Yeah.
It's weighing the person
It's
down.
pain.
But there's one thing that I could, you know, I've got this little technique, and I don't even want to give it away to other sound healers out there, but I guess I don't, what do I got to lose? You know, no. But, you know, with sound, you can hear the part that's still alive. Okay. And it's such a beautiful thing. And so I take that little spot. It might be their throat. It might be their creative center, but most of the energy centers of the body are taken out in the grief process. So that's one thing I can hear. You know, all the chakra systems are just places where we produce hormones, all right? So think about your health taking a nosedive. You're grieving. Your hormone producers are all going, you know, going into basically a zero-sum phase because you're so sad. But there's one that doesn't give up usually. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's the throat, sometimes it's the heart, sometimes it's the creative, like sacral, sometimes it's the solar plexus. The adrenals are going to keep you going somehow. And so that's where I look at it like hot wire in a car or jumping a battery. Okay, I know nothing's wrong with the car. The car's going to run if I can just get that battery jumped. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So I kind of use sound to hot wire one chakra, one energy center to the other energy center.
That's
so I take the one that
Okay.
works, and then you can start to see this person like reactivate and re-blossom without too much of them knowing what you're doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because when you're in that state of grief, you really don't care. You don't know what's going on because nobody has a handbook for grief. Everybody's grief experience is different. But with sound, it's such a simple little thing to be able to hear, and it's so beautiful. Like I'll go through the body and be like, okay, that's dead. That's dead. That went with the person. That went. Oh, we got a pulse. Okay, we got a pulse at the throat. So now we're going to hot wire, and that just seems to be, you know, I'm writing that in my like little training guide, as you know, it's one of the chapters. It's one of the studies of like, you know, each one of these modules, whether you're working on someone's feet or their knees or their hips, it's just like a yoga class. We're working so bottom up, you know, reverse engineering the vagus system, you know, the 10th cranial nerve. Just working from the organs back up and all that emotional stuff.
That's so cool.
You know, it's just very exciting. And it's just, there's just a lot of unknown to it. So that, you know, there's a bit of curiosity. I love like your initial curiosity questions, and then all of a sudden you're defining what I'm doing, which is so beautiful. It's like, okay, well, we have to talk more about this, this window. This, you know, it's a portal, really. It's bigger than a window.
It's
you know?
pretty freaking cool. I mean, and it's not like it's new. I mean, music and sound has been part of the human condition for millennia. So as we're kind of wrapping up,
Yep, I know.
because oh my God, 3 takeaways from today for a person who is interested in sound therapy. You know, where do they find? You know, how do they find a person who does it? How do they know that the person is a, you know, a trained sound therapist? What do you think would be helpful for them to know?
3 takeaways. One is to always feel safe in whatever you're approaching and be like congruent with it. If it doesn't feel like it's right for you, then it's not. You know what I mean? That's just like a simple.
Okay.
But to be open to, you know, one, your own sound diet. You know, like what's around you, what makes you feel good, what doesn't make you feel good.
So pay attention to what you are drawn to in your environment.
Kind of like what,
music and.
I mean, just simple things like, are you working under fluorescent lights? Are you, you know, what's around you that could be like affecting you in different ways? I guess another takeaway is, you know, being open. I get people that have tried everything else. You know what I mean? So I feel like the people that the clients that I get aren't just coming right to, they're saying this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. I heard you do this with sound. Okay. So that's also like not giving up on that not giving up part. Like it's not always, keep your mind open to physics on top of chemistry. Like we're kind of hyper chemical in I love body chemistry and I love talking about it and like the chemistry of emotions and chemistry of love, the chemistry of this. But let's think about the physics of like approaching the body through physics. And that's a whole nother way of looking at this in a lens of healing and wellness of like, I need to, just like if you left your guitar sitting around for a year and a half and you went to play it, it's not going to sound that good. You know, it's gonna have to be tuned.
Right.
And we're no different. So
Right.
we have to look at ourselves just like anything that needs maintenance. You know, our car needs a tune-up. Our house, you know, whatever the heating system needs to be maintained. You know, the air conditioning system needs to be maintained. Like the lifeblood of your body is not just this thing that comes with a warranty and a 100,000-mile guarantee. It's like these are just little simple wellness things to do to kind of, like you said, I elevated myself. I got myself into a different place. I felt grounded. Well, that's a tune-up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It
So that's
definitely
just being that simple. We don't need to be, this is not a cure for cancer.
Right.
This is not, you know, this is just a wellness modality that is really healthy for a lot of different things, whether it's grief, whether it's trauma, whether it's traumatic disorder, whether it's, you know, even like for my personal use and concussion, you know, like this got me out of like kind of being in a meditative state for close to 3 years, you know.
Wow.
I drove to my first class to this like dizzy, like, you know, I don't know if I can drive all the way up to Massachusetts and by myself and go 80 miles an hour in my car for over that many hours,
yeah.
6 hours. Like that's where my head was with my head. And then once I got these tools and started to learn how to use them, I was on the road and driving and feeling good and getting back to normal.
Wow.
So there's something about like, you know, there's something about it that is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
You know, it works.
Yeah.
You know, I know it works because it worked on me.
Yeah.
You know, and so if that's also just being open to when everything else isn't working, you know, think about sound. You know, that's the takeaway. And it's already there.
Yeah.
But it's got to be in safe hands. My thing is safety. Don't you don't go to sit next to 95 for a peaceful weekend at the, you know, you can go sit by the ocean.
Right.
And get all sorts of blue therapy. But when you're sitting on like 95 and trucks are, you know, do you ever have a flat tire on the highway? It's the scariest thing in the world. You know what I mean? Like you think my life is going to end changing this tire.
Right.
That's not where you want to heal.
Right.
You know, you want to be at the beach.
Yeah.
You know, so this is kind of taking you to the proverbial beach. But I just think it's a great thing that you've opened up to also, you know, to have your stamp of approval and have a name on the door for myself as a sound therapist. And I know you don't take that lightly, but we always talk about safety and, you know, the precautions that you took even in like interviewing me and all that stuff is very important, you know, because you can see this take a
Absolutely.
nosedive too, you know.
I am so excited that you came here, and I want to play with all the things, but we're not going to play with all the things because we don't have enough time to play with all the things.
That's fine. Mostly just listening, and I appreciate you listening to the, you know, sometimes it's hard to describe, and I think that there's a beauty to that too. It's like if it's hard to put your finger on it, you know it's something.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And you know maybe it's just a little bit of magic, you know, or what we consider magic, or a miracle. You know what I mean? Like that. It's okay to believe in that. It's okay.
It's okay. A lot of
You know
people
what I mean?
do.
It's helpful.
That's what religion often.
Or just the healing process.
Yeah.
You know, you want to believe that things are going to get better.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the people that are reaching out for this are people that need something.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, it's not just for giggles.
No. I really appreciate you coming.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
This is so much fun.
Yeah,
and,
definitely. And so I thank you so much for listening and or watching. If you have any questions for John or for me, you got a couple options. You can, you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can look underneath where you can make your comments and you can write your questions. I'll keep an eye out for that. Also, you have the option of going to the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy's Facebook page and putting some questions or comments there. And then every kind of quarter, so to speak, I have a question and answer podcast. And so I'll look for those as well. And certainly you can always reach out to us. And if you're interested in knowing more about sound therapy, you know, certainly that would be the time to do it. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and stay tuned for additional really interesting topics. I'm sure I'll have you back because you've got lots
to
look
we're
at.
always coming up
Yeah,
with new things,
we are.
and the ambient field tuning is really just getting off the ground too, with like training other
It's amazing.
tuners and practitioners to kind of
Amazing.
take part in this.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're
All right.
interested, we have the information's really easy and accessible.
And it's on our website too, the Center for
Right.
Grief and Trauma Therapy
Perfect.
website too. So
Perfect.
yeah, that's another place for it. So thank you so
All
much.
right, we're
really
gonna-
appreciate it. Way to go.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who's experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.